One of my favorite scenes in television and movies is when a character goes to confession. I just love this moment. There's this priest behind a screen and this vulnerability that comes out in this anonymous situation. And then generally how the character goes about living their life pretty much in the same way that they were before they went to confession, making mistakes and getting into trouble and ending up back again in the confession. And so it was a disappointment to me when I had a conversation with a Catholic priest several years ago, and he told me that confession was perhaps more common on TV than it is in his parish. So I have to say that although it was a Catholic priest who perhaps first inspired me about ministry when I was a child, I am grateful to be a Unitarian Universalist today. In my work as a pastor, I often have the experience, though, of people coming to me and saying they would like to talk, and in the privacy of my office, confiding. But what I have learned over the years is that most people who come knocking at the door are not wrestling with a deep sense of sin, not asking for absolution or forgiveness. Generally, people come to talk when they are sad, when they are wrestling with some type of inexplicable grief or depression, some pain that goes on and on and on. And my role as a person of faith, as a leader in a faith community, where we say that this pain and suffering is not caused by some wrathful, vengeful deity, or by your own necessary weakness or dependence or sin, but rather the simply human problem of being alive. I know that it is courageous to speak and name these hard feelings and thoughts. And so what I see in people's tender faces is something like what Langston Hughes writes. The night is beautiful, so the faces of my people. The stars are beautiful, so the eyes of my people. Beautiful also is the sun. Beautiful also are the souls of my people. If I could inscribe this poem somehow and send it, each moment this darkness, this sadness, this hardness comes to people, I would. If I could say, if you only knew how many people are struggling as well, how many others sit with this sense of isolation or pain or fear. This isn't even always a comfort. I don't know that misery always wants company. Sometimes misery just wants to be alone. This has been my own experience of depression when it has come into my life in many different incarnations. It has been my experience that depression has many faces, many depths and levels. It can happen to any of us at any time. One close friend described how he would open the fridge for some milk for cereal in the morning, and in reaching for the container, it slipped and fell to the floor. And he started to cry because he felt like he was collapsing, that there was just no way to clean up the spilt milk. And yes, it was just spilt milk. Sometimes depression is like that. Several years ago, when I was struggling with this depression myself, I remembered some wisdom from Dr. Andrew Well. He suggested that you keep natural, fresh flowers in your home. And so I remembered this wisdom and I tried it out. And even though I've really never been able to keep a houseplant alive, I did bring home cut flowers and keep them on a tall, clear vase on my desk. And sometimes I would sit there and eat breakfast with them, and in the evening, their flowerful faces would look back at me. After a few days, of course, they would get droopy and wilt, and I would sit with the flowers and we would be droopy and wilty together. The flowers reminded me that nothing lasts. In a time when emptiness and despair seemed permanent, I saw that even they changed. And I started to believe that with time, I might change too. And in a non-linear, messy pattern of time, I did. All of us have moments, dark nights of the soul, when our inner resources run dry. It is also true that sometimes during these experiences of hopelessness, that our usual strategies, the usual support team that we have, can fall short or fail to address the depth of what we face. There are times when people and even communities can fail to accompany us where we are. And so it is a way in which things beyond what we control or make can be our accompaniment. Last week, we sang words from one of my favorite songs, Breaths by Sweet Honey in the Rock. The words say, "Listen more often to things than to beings. 'Tis the ancestors' words when the voices of the fire is heard. 'Tis the ancestors' words in the voice of the water. Listen more often to things than to beings." There are times when hope is too hard to find on our own, and we need actual, tangible things. Flowers, teacups, music, beauty, to hold us through fear and through grief, through uncertainty. While I sat with the flowers on my desk, doing the hard work of just getting through every day, of course there were people who were holding me in their hearts. My mother, who called even when I didn't want to talk to her. My aunt, who packed up a bundle of autumn leaves and sent them to me in California. Another reminder of seasons and change. Collection of mentors, teachers, and friends who kept pointing me to the door, who kept trying to put my hand on the key to unlock my own despair. And yet I could not have gotten out of there, I don't think, if not for the flowers. And yet, it is true that as a community, we are the holders of hope for people when they cannot hold it for themselves. This is our greatest task. Many congregations hold an annual auction, as does this congregation. And in some, I know this has happened in the past, the minister will auction off a sermon title. I'll confess to you, this is terrifying to me. But I think we're going to try it. Because, maybe some good things will come. And then one good thing that came from a congregation that did this in Massachusetts, I read this story in UU World, is from the congregation of Wayland, Massachusetts. And the minister auctioned off a sermon. And the person who bought it was a mother. Her name was Mary. And she has a particularly hard story. She and her ex-husband had been part of an egregious tragedy. Their 18-year-old daughter had been murdered by her former boyfriend just a few weeks after their high school graduation. So Mary had bought the sermon title, and she had asked the minister to preach on this question: What do you do? How do you live when you have no hope? You can see why I'm nervous about this as a minister, right? And yet there it is. The minister, Reverend Ken Sawyer, shared these words with the congregation in his sermon. He says, there are times, thank goodness, very uncommon times, but times that having hope is more than a person should expect of themselves. Times to just get through, step by step, breath by breath. When hope is something people around you, your family and friends will hold for you until you are ready to receive it back. To Mary, Sawyer said, we are holding this hope for you. The hope you may not be able to have for a while, we are holding it for you and we will not go away. So when I heard this story, something resonated for me. Because there have been these times when I wasn't able to hold on to hope and something else, maybe it was people and maybe it was simply, as Sophie the dragon discovered the beauty of the world, was holding what she could not yet hold for herself. So beauty, not what you find on the cover of a magazine or what gets discounted for a holiday special, but the beauty of ordinary things that comes when we attune our senses to the world around us. The scent of fresh-baked bread, the crisp sweetness of the first bite of apple, the warmth of a hot cup of tea. Attunement to this ordinary beauty is a practice, a discipline, particularly when we're feeling like we can't even get through the day. Several years ago, Marcus and I had just married, and we were preparing to move across the country to start our first ministry position in New York. And we had dinner with two mentors, and one of them, Bill Hamilton Hallway, offered us this question to take with us on our first journey. He said, "What beauty did you notice today? What beauty did you notice today?" And so, as everything around us changed in those months, Marcus and I asked each other this question each night. And we noticed small things. The way water forms a perfect sphere, the river of creases in my grandmother's hands, the aching sound of a cello, the heavy scent of wisteria. To hold on to beauty is to hold on to hope, to hold on to the possibility of transformation for ourselves and the world, even when it doesn't seem possible, not even in the next election cycle. Because it is not individuals who create this world alone. Unitarian Universalist chaplain and writer Kate Braestrap tells this story from her work as a chaplain in the northern woods of Maine. She works as a law enforcement chaplain, visiting families when their loved ones are involved in accidents or crimes. And one night she got a call that an elderly man had gone missing. He had Alzheimer's and his wife was distraught with worry. They lived in the woods. It was winter, it was very cold and very dark that night. Word got out to the neighbors and people started arriving in the middle of the night, wrapped up in thick coats with their flashlights. Kate, the chaplain, led the wife out of her house, and together they sat on the porch, watching the flashes of light spread through the dark woods, searching for the elderly man. "I had no idea," the wife said to Kate, I had no idea so many people would come. It's a miracle. Kate sat on the porch watching the lights move through the shadow of trees. She guessed the man would probably not be found alive. Yet her heart felt full and lifted. The wife was right. This was something of beauty to behold. To know all the people who showed up, who pulled themselves from the comfort of their beds and walked out into the cold world looking. And the husband did not live, but his wife did. She lived and grieved and survived the grief because the casseroles didn't stop coming. Because people drove her to the post office, the church, the doctor, the casino. She was not alone. She experienced the beauty of a caring community. So it is our calling to hold on, to find our shoes and our coats, and to go out into the winter searching for our neighbor's beloved. To show up even when the diagnosis is bad, the results are uncertain, the loss seems unending. It is our job to show up. We don't have to have the right words, but being there, offering the beauty that you are to another person, cannot be underestimated. In her book, The Color Purple, my favorite line, I think it pisses God off if you walk by the color purple in a field somewhere and don't notice it. People think pleasing God is all God cares about, but any fool living in the world can see it is always trying to please us back. So in an effort not to piss that God off, this morning I wanted to offer you a reminder of ordinary beauty, of returning to our senses, the place where we reside when we are not tossed into the future seas of worry or the dark waters of regret. So during the offering, the baskets will come around and you are invited to take a sprig of rosemary that I cut from our landlord's garden. Thank you, Tony and Wanda. And to just take a moment to be with this offering. It is not a flower, but it too grows beyond our control, not of our own making, but for the blessing of being alive. May it be a reminder of the vastness of the world we live in, of that which is by its very presence beautiful, just as you are. Amen, and blessed be.